So the United States and Europe wanted their Klaus Schwab Great Reset, but boy, they weren't expecting this. Little do they know that they'd be getting it much sooner than they bargained for, but not in the way that they actually planned. In fact, Russia and China just pushed the button on the Great Reset, and the West is in deep, deep trouble. I'm going to go through all of the latest data that's out this morning and a bunch of news for what's in store for us in a moment. Some of it's actually pretty jaw-dropping, and there's a lot to cover. But first, did you know that we're at war with China? Oh yeah, according to our members of Congress who just got back from Taiwan yesterday, we're at war with China, so we better get prepared. Here's Representative Tony Gonzalez, who just returned from Taiwan, where we just sent a whole bunch of weapons.
My first question is for you, General. I just got back from a trip from Taiwan. It's the second trip to Taiwan in the past 14 months. I spent 20 years in the military, as my good friend August Pfluger pointed out, our chairman pointed out. I know what war looks like. We're at war. I mean, this is a war.
What the hell? I mean, really? So who the heck voted for a war against China? Did you? I didn't. Do these people even understand what they're saying? The deep state is actively pushing for war with China as the U.S. dollar continues its downward spiral. Did you hear about the runs on the banks on Friday? Yeah, banks collapsing, people losing their money in the banks in the United States.
Yesterday, some of the biggest banks in this country, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, collectively lost more than $50 billion in market value in one day.
Here's Representative Chris Stewart this week calling for the abolition of the one China policy, meaning Taiwan is not part of China anymore, and that's enough to provoke China into a war with the United States that we will not win. Watch this.
Times are different now. If we're going to deter, I think we have to be clear in saying, yes, we will defend Taiwan militarily if we have to.
Well, this is all happening for a reason. They're scared shitless about what Russia and China are doing, which is building an economic behemoth that the West cannot compete with. Get ready for war. That's what a top U.S. general is now telling his troops, to get ready for war by the year 2025. General Minihan sent a letter to his troops telling them, hey, you better get ready. Now, even before we blew up their natural gas pipeline, they were building that coalition to dethrone the United States' dollar dominance. And historically, the way that we deal with people like this is we threaten war, and we actually try to destabilize these countries through regime change and sanctions, like we're doing in Ukraine right now to Russia. And now we're about to do the very same thing in Mexico. Earlier this week, Mexico announced its intent to join Russia and China as part of the BRICS nations. Holy crap! Our neighbor Mexico, the country we've been exploiting for years, a country we invaded and took their land in the 1840s, they finally had enough of our bullying garbage and is starting to stand its ground, wants to align their currency and trade with China and Russia. Now, I would say Mexico has a plethora of trading options.
What is a plethora?
Why, Guapo?
Well, you told me I have a plethora.
And then just like that, a plethora of U.S. congressmen started talking about invading Mexico with U.S. military forces. Here's Gringo, Lindsey Graham, Ukraine's favorite senator, introducing legislation to invade Mexico.
I'm going to introduce legislation, Jesse, to make certain Mexican drug cartels, foreign terrorist organizations under U.S. law, and set the stage to use military force if necessary to protect America from being poisoned by things coming out of Mexico.
These people are insane. And then, not to be outdone, is Congressman Dan Crenshaw calling for U.S. military in Mexico.
Hoy quiero dirigir este mensaje al presidente de México, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Señor presidente, usted recientemente criticó mi plan para autorizar la fuerza militar contra los carteles.
So watch as we alienate our closest allies, like we just did with the Nord Stream pipeline destruction. This week we saw the greatest pile of propaganda we've seen in a long time, and it had to do with the Nord Stream pipeline. First, the New York Times ran a propaganda piece saying this week that they can now confirm that a pro-Ukrainian group carried out the pipeline attack. Pro-Ukrainian, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, know what I mean? AKA the CIA and the United States. And then, not to be outdone, a German newspaper followed up like good state-run media does and said, yes, it was a pro-Ukrainian group, and they even identified the yacht that these people used to blow up the pipeline. Yeah, this is the yacht called the Andromeda, according to the German newspaper, which might be the most amazing pile of garbage I've ever seen if it wasn't so sad that they actually think we'd believe them. Can you imagine there's people actually reading these newspapers and believing this garbage? They think you're stupid. We know that 500 kilograms of explosives were used to blow up the pipeline, according to Seymour Hersh. which if you put that much weight on this boat, it would sink the boat to the bottom of the ocean. But don't get too caught up in the details. As journalist Aaron Mate writes about this yacht, to whoever is doing the Nord Stream cover-up, first, I don't envy you, tough job. Second, why not find a bigger boat, one that could conceivably carry the hundreds of pounds of explosives needed to blow up a heavily fortified deep-sea pipeline in multiple areas? Great point. Next, Europe is trying to desperately downplay the Nord Stream attack because it portends something much bigger, an energy great reset for Europe. And this is something that Europe wanted, but they wanted to do it on their own terms, eliminating combustion engine cars by 2035. Now that calendar has been accelerated, eliminating oil and natural gas, turning off nuclear power plants, then moving towards solar and wind completely. They thought that Russia would come crawling back crying, begging for Europe to take their natural gas. Instead, Putin and China just flipped a big freaking switch and shifted those resources into BRICS nations. They're not coming back crying, begging, take our natural gas, please. You know, you blew up our pipeline, but we'd really like to sell it to you. Indonesia, do you need cheap oil and gas from Russia? We've got it. What about you, Mexico? What about you, China? And that's exactly what just happened. Yesterday, we got word that Russia and China have just hit a new trade record, unlike anything we've ever seen before. And new customs data out this week shows that Russia and China are on pace to hit $200 billion this year. That's up 31% over last year. Now, why on earth would Russia go back to providing oil and natural gas to Europe when they're actively sending weapons to attack Russia? The answer is they will not. And if that's not bad enough news for the United States, here's this today. The Chinese yuan currency has outperformed the dollar by volume of trading on the Moscow exchange for the first time on record. Yeah, that just happened. Based on data from the Moscow exchange, the Chinese yuan was the most traded currency in February, displacing the US dollar from the top spot. And we got our clearest indication from China this week, right from the mouth of their president Xi Jinping, that they are not going to take this any longer from the United States, that they view what the United States is doing to their country as suppression of China. During his speech this week, he said, quote, Western countries led by the United States have implemented all-around containment, encirclement, and suppression against us, bringing unprecedentedly severe challenges to our country's development. When have you ever heard a Chinese president talk that way? The answer is you haven't, they don't, this is unprecedented. So the biggest supplier of cheap natural gas just vanished from the European market, and the effects of this are now starting to show even during this mild winter. Now remember, the real story will be next winter when all of their backup supplies are gone. Now that Russia's natural gas is gone, Bloomberg reports that the energy crisis will cost Germany $1 trillion. Send that bill to the United States. And because of Russia's gas restrictions, we've seen the largest inflationary shock in Europe since World War II, even beating the 1970s oil crisis, if you can believe that. Also this week, we learned that Germany is warning of electrical outages. According to the newspaper Welt am Sonntag, Germany should expect power cuts, that over the next 2 years, they won't be able to handle the extra load to the power grid now that their supplies have been cut, unless they can get new forms of cheap energy, new forms of cheap natural gas, which we'll actually get to in a minute. And just this morning, Bloomberg reporting that energy prices are soaring across Europe. Gas futures up 21%, which is the most since June. This will destroy lives and it will destroy businesses. So that's the news portion of today's video. Now I want to tell you about today's sponsor, which is tied directly to the natural gas needs of Europe today. And if you're an investor, you need to pay attention to what I'm about to show you, because the company I want to tell you about, MCF Energy, right now, their stock is trading at 44 cents a share. But in my opinion, that's not going to last for much longer. Their stock is already up 41% this year. Here is their ticker on your screen, MCFNF. Now, this company is right now the one and the only company currently exploring for natural gas in Western Europe. Think about that for a second. As the war broke out, MCF Energy jumped into action, actually started studying the natural gas spots in Europe, designated about 20 specific drilling sites. Then they narrowed that down to the 2 best spots right now. Can you imagine? No other company was doing this because they were lulled into a false sense of security using cheap Russian gas. So there was no drilling or exploring happening in Europe at all. Then the war breaks out, and the European Union, which has been nuts about getting away from fossil fuels, suddenly did an about-face on natural gas. And they changed the designation of natural gas to a green energy. Can you imagine? It is. Now they realize it, Europe does. And they realize, oh shit, we are in deep. So they said, okay, now companies, go out there, find natural gas in Europe, start drilling, please, start exploring, go, get out the door, do it right now. And MCF Energy is literally the one company doing this. And now they've identified and bought two amazing drilling zones that are in the exploration phase. One is in Austria, the other is in Germany, of all places. Austria is about to start drilling this year. Germany, that spot is still waiting on permits, so they can start there. That means that the stock price is not going to stay at this price much longer, in my opinion. Now, once drilling commences on these spots and they hit pay dirt, look out. This is just the beginning. And they just raised $12 million and are about to buy more spots to start exploring and drilling. And by the way, these guys know exactly what they're doing. They buy great land with natural gas spots, they drill, they rinse, and they repeat. Let me dive even deeper into this. This is the only public company offering exposure to new European gas markets since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. And it's the first company to become a natural gas explorer and developer in Europe. Now, when I first started discovering this company and started doing my own research on it, which I'll show you in a minute, I jumped out of my office chair and I told my wife, we have got to invest in this company. So let me show you exactly why I'm so excited about what MCF Energy is doing. Number one, the people on this team are unbelievable, and they have an unbelievable track record of creating companies and then selling them for massive profits. Now, the team that came together to create MCF Energy in the past already founded and grew multi-billion-dollar energy companies in Europe, and then they sold them off and they made a lot of money. They know exactly what they're doing. These people make money for shareholders. That's what they do. General Wesley Clark is a strategic advisor to the company. He is one of the most well-connected people from the United States in Europe. And when he gets on the phone, things happen, doors open. He can open countless doors. Now, right after he got out of politics, he went into the energy sector. He sold a company that made billions. That company was called Bankers Petroleum. He helped grow that company by 2,000%. Yeah, he 20x'd that company and sold it for $2 billion. Basically, the team on MCF Energy has done this 4 times, where they built companies in the energy sector in Europe and then sold them off. Number 2 on my list, MCF Energy wants to become the dominant natural gas company in Europe. And there are no other companies, none. There haven't been for 40 years because they could get cheap natural gas from Russia. And now they need this more than ever. Number 3, right now, Europe is buying expensive natural gas from the United States and Canada. They have to freeze it, they have to load it onto ships, and then they have to bring it across the ocean and then basically unfreeze it. They're paying 3 to 4 times the amount that they normally do or that they normally should be doing. Germany flipped out about this. Remember that member of parliament that was like, why are we paying so much money for gas from the United States? So I'm personally betting very big on this company in my portfolio of companies right now. Do your own due diligence on this company. As of this recording, this weekend, they're trading at 44 cents a share. Now, a lot of you last week asked me, what brokerage do I use to buy some of these smaller producers? Because you can't buy them on those smaller exchanges like a Robinhood or anything like that. You can't do that. You need one of the big boys like E-Trade or TD Ameritrade or Fidelity. Any one of those, you need a big boy, okay? The one that I personally use is E-Trade to buy my smaller mining stocks like this. Again, you can use Fidelity or TD Ameritrade, but personally I use E-Trade, which is in the United States. So guys, do your own due diligence on studying this company. I'm a big advocate of natural gas and fossil fuels. We need them now more than ever, and these insane politicians are trying to move us to solar or wind, and they're watching their plan crumbling right before their faces. So I'm going to have links in the description below so you can go to their website, you can check out their latest projects in Europe and where they're planning to explore next. I'll have their ticker in the description as well, and we'll see you next time.